Observer Research Foundation, ORF, 3rd of May 2023, China-India relations, still stuck. China wants to keep India stuck in the north to build a fleet and take control of the Indian Ocean. Despite 2 meetings between India and China in the past week, there is no indication that these ties are improving. If anything, it demonstrates that there has been no development. The first meeting was the Corps Commander level talks between India and China, which took place on April 23 to discuss the border impasse. This was the 18th meeting since the conflict started, and 4 months had passed since the previous meeting. As part of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, SCO, military ministers meeting, which took place in India on April 27 to 28, the second meeting was between Indian Military Minister Rajnath Singh and his Chinese counterpart, General Li Shangfu. According to the Indian Ministry of External Affairs press statement and media sources that quote officials who spoke anonymously, India and China are very far away when it comes to disengaging their armed forces. This is relevant to the meeting between military commanders at the border. For the past 3 years, these forces have been gathered near the border in an unheard-of concentration and state of high alert. According to a press release from the Ministry of External Affairs on the military discussions, the two parties conducted a frank and in-depth discussion in order to restore peace and tranquility in the border areas, which will enable progress in bilateral relations. The Indian side pushed for the disengagement of forces at the strategically located Depsang Bulgaria and the charting Ninglong Nala, CNN, track junction at Dimchok as the first step that could then result in a gradual de-escalation and disengagement of the 50,000 troops stationed in eastern Ladakh, a key area of conflict, according to media reports. The conference, according to a different source in Indian media, failed to make headway on the contentious issue of the Depsang Plains and de-escalation along the line of actual control, LAC, in eastern Ladakh. There was no breakthrough in the most recent session, according to sources in the Indian defense and security establishment who spoke to the media. The Indian side pushed for a de-escalation along the LAC and an easing of tensions in the Depsang Plains. According to other media reports based on official sources, legacy issues along the LAC, such as Depsang Plains and Dimchok, will be discussed in subsequent meetings and at the political level. Conversations at the military level centered on confidence-building measures and avoiding confrontation at the borders in the coming months. Confidence-building measures can help reduce disputes, but a lack of understanding, agreements, or pledges did not cause the Galwan conflict. It is unclear whether additional actions to boost confidence are required to restore the status quo or lessen the likelihood of a confrontation. All eyes were on the Chinese defense ministers meeting with Singh on April 27 after the military-level negotiations failed to produce results. Since the conflict in Galwan in May 2020, the two nations' defense ministers have not met in person until now. It speaks a lot about the nature of the exchange that the two ministers did not publish a single statement but released separate accounts of their discussions. The Indian minister reportedly said, "All issues at LAC need to be resolved by existing bilateral agreements and commitments." Moreover, Singh reiterated that violation of existing agreements has eroded the entire basis of bilateral relations and that disengagement at the border will logically be followed with de-escalation. In addition, the minister included a clause stating that the development of India-China ties is premised on the prevalence of peace and tranquility at the borders, which has been a point of contention for the Indian side for the past few years. Dr. S. Jaishankar, the External Affairs Minister, has repeatedly emphasized this fact. On the other hand, a statement from the Chinese Defense Ministry gave the impression that the meeting went as planned. It stated, "China and India share far more common interests than differences as major neighboring countries and important developing countries." According to Li, China and India should view bilateral relations and each other's development from a comprehensive, long-term and strategic perspective. The two should jointly contribute wisdom and strength to world and regional peace and stability. He asserted that the situation on the India-China border was generally stable and that the two sides continued communicating via diplomatic and military channels. More intriguingly, China seems to be sticking with its previous strategy of prioritizing other parts of the relationship above border disputes. According to the statement, the two nations should take a long-term view, place the border issue in an appropriate position in bilateral relations, and promote the transition of the border situation to normalized engagement. China is not in a rush to resolve the border dispute, and India's attempt to jeopardize the more significant relationship is failing. Although there have been some areas along the LAC where tensions have subsided, there is still a significant force deployment, with 50,000 to 60,000 soldiers on each side, all armored and equipped with artillery. It is impossible to rule out the possibility of an unintentional conflict in such situations. In addition to the potential for accidental confrontation, residents lament lost territories. The Ladakh Hill Development Council member Kanchok Stanzan claims that during this winter, the pastures in Fertsog Karpo, Pterstugnakpo, Helmet Top, Gurung Hill, Magar Hill, Rizong La, Richan La and Mukpuri have been out of reach of grazers. He reportedly noted in a notebook that most of these places were under Indian military control during an offensive operation, Operation Snow Leopard, in August 2020, but had to be vacated during the Pangong Tso disengagement process with the PLA. The people living along the border have paid the price for China's salami slicing strategy toward India. As 90% of the local community relies on livestock, he asserted that this has had a severe impact on livelihoods. Their situation has gotten worse. Given the current situation, which has seen no improvement in India and China's border disputes, the Indian Defence Ministry is prioritizing infrastructure development. Ajit Doval, the National Security Advisor, General Anil Chauhan, Air Chief Marshal V.R. Chaudhary, and Army Chief General Manoj Panda were among the senior union ministers and other government representatives who attended the Conference of All Stakeholders, which Singh called in the first few days of March. At the conference were also other government representatives from the Indian states that border China, including Uttarakhand, Ladakh, and Arunachal Pradesh. The discussion was centered on developing infrastructure, including physical connectivity and communication nodes, from Ladakh to Arunachal Pradesh to increase residents' employment possibilities in these regions. Both parties seem committed in the long run.